Okay, today we're going to talk about the war in Europe. So the United States was fighting a war on two fronts, in the Pacific and in Europe. In the Pacific, that was where we were fighting Japan. Instead of invading Europe, Churchill from England and Roosevelt decided to invade the periphery of the German Empire, that means the outside of it, in North Africa and in the Atlantic, where German submarines were entering U.S. coastal waters. The Battle of Stalingrad was a big defeat for Germany, which showed that they could not defeat the Soviets. So this is the North Africa campaign. North Africa was important to the Allies for keeping the Suez Canal and the Middle East oil reserves out of German control. Hitler ordered an attack on Cairo in Egypt and the Suez Canal in the summer of 1942. The Germans were defeated twice by the British at El Alamein. The German forces in North Africa were commanded by General Erwin Rommel, whose tactical battlefield skills earned him the nickname the Desert Fox. The Supreme Allied Commander for the United States was General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who later became president. In November of 1942, Allied forces launched Operation Torch, an invasion of North Africa. The goal was to box in the German forces between the British to the east and the Americans to the west. Up against the strong Allied forces, Rommel's attacks were blocked, and he began withdrawing from the area in February of 1943. He relinquished his command in March of that year. At the Casablanca Conference, Roosevelt and Churchill agreed to increase the bombing of Germany and attack the Italian island of Sicily. The attack on Sicily prompted Italy's king to arrest Mussolini and surrender to the Allies. Germany captured Rome and put Mussolini back in power until the Allies defeated them again. The Tehran Conference resulted in Stalin's help to the Allies and the agreement to an international peacemaking organization after the war. Stalin was Russia. The Tehran Conference, the leaders met at Tehran, Iran in 1943. They discussed the Soviet offensive against Germany and the post-war division of Germany. They also discussed the Soviet aid against Japan, and they agreed on an international peacekeeping body. Roosevelt and Churchill decided to plan an invasion of France, and Roosevelt chose General Eisenhower to head the mission. Equipment for the large-scale invasion of the Normandy coast involved storing massive supplies in England until they were ready to be used by the American, British, and Canadian troops. June 6, 1944 became known as D-Day, and the invasion of the beaches occurred under terrible weather, challenging troops coming ashore. So here's Stalingrad. I forgot to show you this. Adolf Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union proved disastrous. The Germans had seriously underestimated the Red Army's strength and resolve, and the Battle of Stalingrad proved the beginning of the end for the Nazis. The entire Nazi invasion force dedicated to the Soviet Union included more than 3 million soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 7,000 artillery pieces, and 2,500 aircraft. It is believed to be the most powerful invasion force ever. Stalingrad was coveted by the Nazis because it manufactured armaments for the Soviets, it's their bullets and weapons. Also, the occupation of Stalingrad would have aided the Nazis' drive to capture the oil fields of the Caucasus, a wartime prize. The advance of winter aided the Soviets' determination to regain control of Stalingrad. The brutal weather and mounting losses left the German forces exhausted and with little will to fight. On January 31st, 1943, the German commander, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, and 24 generals defied Adolf Hitler's orders and surrendered to the Soviets. Only about 91,000 German fighters remained out of the original 3 million. The rest of the soldiers had been wounded, captured, killed, or were missing. Here's the D-Day invasion. American troops hunkered down in a barge bound for the beaches at Normandy and the Allied invasion of Europe. Many of the soldiers landing in craft like these would die from enemy fire before reaching the land. The Allied invasion consisted of US, Canadian, and British forces and included 3,000 landing craft, 2,500 other ships, and 500 naval vessels. The night before D-Day, the skies over Normandy were filled with paratroopers seeking to establish areas of the beach to defend, called beachheads. When the Allied soldiers had left the landing craft and moved toward the beach, the barge returned to an offshore ship to pick up another load of soldiers. This back and forth system continued throughout D-Day. Upon leaving the barges, the soldiers faced incredible obstacles. The beaches were heavily mined and booby-trapped. From the cliffs overlooking the beaches, a hail of German machine gunfire rained down. The landing at Omaha Beach almost failed before Allied troops finally secured the beach. The Allies sustained more than 2,000 casualties in taking Omaha Beach. So now let's watch this video.
5 days after the Cairo conference, another conference was held at Tehran, capital of Allied Iran. Here, the chief executives of Britain and the United States met for the first time with Marshal Stalin. They reaffirmed their country's determination to work together in the war and in the peace to follow. These Yugoslav partisans had already made their choice. Although their country was under German occupation, they were never defeated. Under the leadership of Marshal Tito, 300,000 of them fought on unceasingly. The underground in France, the other occupied countries, organized to form strong reserve armies, waiting for the day when they could join the United Nations in the fight against the common enemy. The dawn of that day came on June 6, 1944. Allied armies, troops of the United States, Great Britain, the Dominions, and forces of the men who had escaped from the occupied countries, all under the supreme command of General Eisenhower, set out by sea and air for Normandy. Germany was now being attacked simultaneously from Russia in the east, from Italy in the south, and from Great Britain in the west. This was the operation planned 6 months before at Tehran.
It was no easy task. In Europe and the Pacific, months of savage, bloody fighting lay ahead. Every foot of the way was bitterly contested by a ruthless enemy. But step by step, he was pushed back by the Allied armies. The underground forces of liberation knew their finest hour when the people of Paris rose to strike at the enemy. Even as the Allies battered at the gates, freedom returned to the City of Light. Freedom. This was the prize for which millions of free men had taken up arms, for which men had been willing to sacrifice their treasure and their lives. It is in this knowledge that the Allied armies push relentlessly on, determined that with victory will come the fulfillment of the declaration made at Tehran, that all the peoples of the world may live free lives, untouched by tyranny, and according to their varying desires and their own consciences.
All right, now what you need to do is go into Canvas, complete the reading essentials, the discussion question, the quiz, and complete the Edgenuity module assigned for today.